and the sixth greatest species extinction is happening now. Let's not pretend that isn't happening. Research shows that people being together outdoors doing something collective improves people's sense of well-being.
Have you ever wondered how writing can support your well-being? Join us on Grafto, the Power of Writing podcast, where we explore the transformative power of words. I'm your host, Alina Maragelis, and together with our amazing guests, we'll delve into the world of writing and its incredible benefits. So today we are joined by Mark Smalley. He is a former BBC producer of features and documentaries. He has a master in creative writing for therapeutic purposes, and he now explores the connection between nature, writing, and activism. He edited Cornerstones, his book featuring 20 contemporary writers and poets, and developed the touchstone methods, which I'm very keen to know more about. Mark, welcome.
Thank you. Lovely to meet you, Alina.
And let's start. Tell us a bit where, how is this shift? How did this shift happen from your career to what you're doing now?
Well, I was very lucky in my radio career to have quite a lot of freedom and latitude to explore my own passions and make radio programs about them. And one of the things that has always fascinated me is landscape, and the hard landscape as well, meaning rocks, hills, mountains, the ground beneath our feet. And for me, ever since I was a child, that was a place of wonder. So I would often find myself making programs in caves, underground, or with archaeologists, with geologists, and so on. And I just have this innate fascination with deep time stories of this Earth that is 4.6 billion years old and still evolving. And we have this minuscule intersection with it in our 70 years, if we're lucky. But it's that point of intersection of us with life and landscape, but in particular the Earth, and I mean capital E for Earth, the planet, through rocks, and some people are interested in other elements, be it water, be it fire and air. But for me, my primary way in is via rock. It could be a fetish. I'm not sure. Sometimes I wonder if, I've got a favorite stone here, which I'm just dunking in water. And if I hold that up, this is a piece of red and black veined serpentine. And if I tell you, for example, this was created 5 kilometers below the surface of the Earth 300 million years ago, it surfaced somewhere down near where Australia is now, and it's been traveling north ever since. And like us, it's traveling north at the same speed at which our fingernails are growing. Well, that's actually quite fast,
Wow.
And so for me, just sheer facts like that, geological facts, those are things of wonder. Who needs metaphor or who needs metaphysics when you've got geological facts like those?
Very beautiful. And what's the connection with the writing? So tell us a bit, how do you create the connection?
Yeah, that's a good question. Where I started is with a sense of concern about and deep love for the Earth and the peril of man-made climate change. We are burning more and more fossil fuels. The science is clear. We've got to stop doing it and to decarbonize immediately. Now, to acknowledge these truths is politically deeply inconvenient for some, but nonetheless, it has to be said. So I began by working with a group of climate activists, and I'm one myself. And rather than buying into the cultural sense of denial or distraction from these uncomfortable facts. Someone who's very important to me is the eco-Buddhist philosopher Joanna Macy, who's in her 90s, lives in California. And for nearly 50 years, she's been evolving methods to support environmental activists. And where this fits with the writing is to start with gratitude. That gets a long way. And then to lean into the pain we might feel about the world, the situation of this global warming, and the sixth greatest species extinction is happening now. Let's not pretend that isn't happening. And then a third stage of a spiral that she describes is called seeing anew with ancient eyes, to see anew with ancient eyes. And that's where my touchstone approach comes in, because somehow, but for me, by engaging with rock and stone, this is a piece of black limestone here. A lot of limestone is white, but this is black limestone from Italy. And by paying attention to these things and just having a little bit of geological knowledge and opening up a place of play and curiosity and engaging with the rock and asking questions of it, then I think what I have found from my research doing creative writing workshops with climate activists and others is that this is an opportunity then for connecting with the earth around us in ways that for people is broadly deeply unfamiliar. So the workshops I ran, I live in Bristol in the west of England. The nearby coast of the North Somerset coast, like everywhere, is already experiencing rising sea levels. So I held the workshops there on the coast, of course, a place of rock and stone. And for the participants, this was an entirely novel experience because I got them to lie down on rocks for 10 minutes and just to experience being held and supported by the earth, or to find a stone that spoke to them and to really hold it and look at it if it's one that's hand-sized, and without any writing at all, just to be curious about it and pay it attention. And I don't know if you've managed to bring a stone or a pebble along yourself,
I did. We have to tell our audience a bit about this. So Mark asked me to bring some water and stones. Well, I actually decided, because I have a number of stones up here. I love stones. And I thought I'll see which one which one I can grab from here.
Excellent.
So that I'll see whatever will talk to me today. So today it looks like it's this one.
Yeah, excellent.
And I don't know what Mark wants to do with it. So I'm hearing this as probably as our audience. So for the first time. So yes, Mark, I have the stone.
Yeah.
And I also have here the water on the side.
Excellent. I'm wondering if that might be some rock salt, or is it pink quartz maybe? I can't quite tell.
Yeah, it's rose quartz, yeah.
It's rose quartz, beautiful, So for some people that has specific spiritual qualities to aid meditation and so on, So tell me the story that piece of rose quartz has in your life, Alina.
Yeah, so I normally go when I travel. I find stores stores with stones. I think when I was little, I used to go at the beach, and I had so many. My mom had to throw them out. But this one I bought in a store in Spain.
Right. But you've kept it, and you've moved.
What I have up here. Like I can try and grab more, but
yes.
Different stones, and I keep them. Yeah.
Right. So I've found a fellow stone lover, and they matter to you. And yes. Do they carry stories for you? Are you willing to share the reason why you hold on to those stones and what they mean to you?
I don't know. I mean, first of all, I like their texture, so I find I kind of, when I buy them or when I collect them, I kind of see, I hold them in my hand and I see, yeah, if I
Mm,
can, I don't know, connect with them somehow.
mm.
And then I keep them, and now and then, yeah, I look at them and hold
Yeah,
them again. Yeah.
there we
So
are. Well, I mean, honestly, I feel you put your finger there on a lot of the things that matter to me, and it's the tactile quality of these stones.
this one actually matches with my top
Oh,
today.
that's beautiful. Is that a seashell?
Yes, yes,
Oh, it's beautiful, like a
yes,
mussel.
yes, like a muscle. This one
Yeah,
I collected. Yeah.
right.
So yeah, a
But,
number of them.
but
So
it's
I'm really very, very prepared for this, Mark.
yeah, excellent.
With all these
Excellent.
stones.
And
Yeah,
those mussel shells are made of calcium, just like our bones, you
yeah,
know. So we are all, we are elemental.
yeah.
That's what I want to say, and to bring it back to the writing. Your question about the writing. What I try to create is a place for gentle curiosity and wonder.
Mm.
And so what I find is just a little bit of geological knowledge goes a long way. And I don't need to know the particularities of the Eocene period, or whatever particular process. Even those things are fascinating. It's just, I told you about the journey of this piece of serpentine,
Yes. That's
from way below the Earth's surface, actually from just at that interface between the mantle and the crust, and the fact that it is here, in my life,
mm,
um, and the process that I call touchstone. You were talking there about the
mm,
tactility,
mm.
and for me, there is a deep reassurance of being with stone, because of their long journeys that are so much longer than ours, and that sense of us being made of stardust.
Mm.
How life itself quite possibly
Mm.
was brought to this planet from outer space, and it is life actually began. It's believed from the erosion of rock
Yes.
by the earliest lichen and algae and so on, and those were the first single celled life forms, and it has evolved since. There's a line of Emily Dickinson that really speaks to me around this. So I talked about Joanna Mace's spiral, and to start with gratitude, the sheer variety of life that we're part on, but then to share our pain for the world, for the state of the world. And that, for me, means leaning into the scientific facts of climate change and species extinction. But equally, at the same time, and this is to do with ethics, I think it's really important that we look after ourselves and others. And the line of Emily Dickinson that speaks to me is, tell all the truth, but tell it slant. Success in circuit lies. Tell all the truth, but tell it slant. Success in circuit lies. And this for me is about perhaps coming at things sidelong. And these are deeply elemental times, in terms of climate change. The worst fires on record, the rising sea levels, the melting of polar ice, the increasing arid regions across central Africa, agriculture becoming impossible. The hottest 10 years ever recorded have been in the last 15 years. And the warming of the globe, it's already warmed 3/4 of a degree over the last 100 years. That might not sound much, but it is happening 10 times faster than the warming that happened 10,000 years ago after the last ice age.
Mm.
That is a cause for concern, and it's human induced. And for me, if you can bear with a little bit of philosophy, if you like, my without sounding too grandiose, this touchstone process is of focusing in a tactile way on rock and stone, is a response to the Cartesian dualism, the split between mankind and nature, between head and heart, and all of these splits. And so somehow for me, yes, these are elemental times, but paying attention to the element of earth through rock can perhaps begin to rectify and help us reconnect with our wider selves, and this concept of the more than human world, to connect with the entanglement of the wide variety of species that we're a part, rather than seeing rather than seeing ourselves as separate and superior somehow. So in a very modest way, carving out a bit of time to pay attention to rock, there's a lot of thought and connection, I hope, going on under there, which has been confirmed to me by the participants in the workshops that I've run. So, for example, last summer I went to Buddhafield Festival, where we were running workshops, a bunch of us, around Joanna Mace's work that reconnects, it's called. It's this way of increasing resilience in the face of the climate and nature crises. And in that part of the spiral where it comes to seeing anew with ancient eyes, I had a big bowl full of different stones, and we had 40 people in a workshop in a yurt, and paper and pens, and each individual, 40 people, chose a stone, and then ran through the touchstone exercise of just responding to some gentle questions that relate to who, what, where, when, why. And that's why I was asking you to take up your piece of rose quartz there and to dunk it in some water. And for me, stone comes alive when it's wet. It becomes something different. And let's see the rose quartz, Selena, when you
Let's see if you want to alive now. I would say so.
Very good. It's got a lovely gleam on it. Yeah, excellent. And likewise, the black limestone. When I've wetted it, I feel things.
The matching one. The one matching with my top.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, really lovely amethyst color there.
And what are some of the benefits of writing about nature, Mark?
Well, there's been a lot of research that just demonstrates. I mean, it's a shame to have to spell this out, really. It's an indication of how divorced society and people have come from the great outdoors and being in nature. But would you believe that the research shows that people being together outdoors, doing something collective, improves people's sense of well-being,
Of course.
For our grandparents' generation, they would be laughing at us to think that this even needs to be spelt out. But sadly, this is where we are. And, there are maps that have been drawn of the freedom that our grandparents' generation had to roam as children. And it might be as much as 6 miles away from home, and by foot, or by certainly longer by bike. But now children are by and large, there's such a sense of fear, or micromanagement, or lack of opportunity or time on the part of the parents, that many children barely go outdoors and might not know much further than the end of their street. Yeah. So, the very, even before we get to the writing, just the opportunity of being together outdoors and having a communal activity, whatever it might be, planting trees or growing food, whatever it might be, that already is known to be good for us. So the particular element then, in terms of touchstone, of paying attention to rock, I've described some of the reasons as to why that might be beneficial.
From your experience, Mark, how does the act of physically interacting with a rock, holding it, feeling its texture, as you were saying, how is it enhancing the writing process, or our connection with nature?
Yeah, I mean, for me, rock and stone is entirely tactile, and you can get a sense of how it's made. So if you think of the granularity of a sandstone, that which is composed from rocks that have long ago been eroded and swept out to sea and then laid down and then pressurized and reformed. And the rose quartz that you have in your hand, could we have a look at it again, please? Because
Yes, the
we'll
big
get a
one.
sense.
Yeah.
Could you hold it a bit closer to the camera? We'll get a sense of its glassiness,
Yeah.
and it's massive in the sense of, I don't mean it's really big, but it is all
It
of a
is quite big as well because I have
yes.
a lot of
But,
smaller
but
ones.
by massive, I mean it's all of a single piece, whereas
Yes, yeah, it is
sandstone
one piece.
or
Yeah.
limestone is composed of lots of tiny little pieces. And I think we can get a lot just from paying attention to the actual matrix, to the material itself. But more than that, and I'm holding the black limestone in my hand. There's for me something really reassuring and literally grounding about
Mm.
holding this in my hand. And I would say when it comes to writing, the writing that I most touches me, that speaks to me most, has an embodied quality, and so it will it will be sensory to some extent, not just the sense of looking at it, but the feel and the heft of it. I love the word, the sense of the heft of rock or stone, and that's something that rock climbers know about. When they're climbing bare rock with their hands. And so the embodiedness of an experience, stone is in our experience with it with it as an embodied one. Let's say if we're in a city and old buildings and indeed modern go to considerable expense to display their prestige through the rocks, the cut stone, the polished stone. If you think of old Victorian banks and marble polished granites and things like that, that still applies to modern skyscrapers. If we think of in the city of London and so on, they're still using marble. So this still speaks to people. And for me, people talk about semi-precious stones. I think that's a bit of a slur on all stones. I think for me, all stones are precious, actually.
Yes. And beautiful.
And beautiful, totally, and for me, absolutely captivating. But I'm willing to admit, for me, this might be a bit of an obsession. And the other thing I wanted to say
No.
is that there's probably a quality here of deep reassurance. I'm very happy to admit that I think, for me, the stones have a reassuring quality of a transitional object for me. But between which state and the next, I'm not quite sure, other than that sense of me finding them reassuring and deeply grounding.
And what are some of the writings that come out? So how is that connection created? So once we feel the texture, how are we connecting that with writing?
Well, in the workshops, I invite people to ask, to start with the basic journalistic questions, even of the stone: who, what, where, when, why, how, and to listen for the answers, and not to rush them. And you could say this is a sense of anthropomorphizing the stone, of conferring human qualities on it, because unless you're stoned yourself, is the stone going to reply? But it might do in some shape or form. And this is where sometimes in the workshops I give a little bit of background, geological knowledge about the stone, where it might have come from, the sort of age, the sort of journey that it has been. But then I like to invite people to frame slightly more mystical questions, if you like, of what do you dream of at night, or what languages do you speak, or where do you feel most at home? And so that sense of representing the stoniness in myself or in oneself, all I can convey is the feedback from the workshops, where
Yes.
people have been genuinely touched and delighted and just said, I've never, this happened with the workshops on the beaches of North Somerset, and people saying, do you know, I've been on the beach 100 times, sunbathing or swimming or whatever, but I have never paid attention to the rocks or stones. And if it's a shingle beach, then that's perhaps uncomfortable to walk on to get down to the water. But the focus of these workshops was to pay attention to the rock and the stone. And people found it genuinely moving. And the opportunity for play that the writing workshop gave to actually, it's a bit like being a child again. Hey, we're carving out a little bit of time to be with these rocks or stones and to ask some questions of them and to be open enough, and don't be afraid to be a bit daft, to imagine what the answers might be to these sorts of questions. And indeed, to offer people their own time to explore. And it was very interesting on one of the workshops. One participant had in her work had been working in planning for a local authority, but dealing with the extraction of minerals, of coal and so on. And she had a very clear view that one had to be very respectful of the stones and to leave them in situ, not to take them away. And I'm afraid I'm often guilty of that, as you can see, but that was a really interesting contribution that she made of, no, those rocks belong here, and to have a really respectful attitude towards them. Touchstone in its very small, modest way, if that induces a space for that encourages curiosity and a sense of connection with the wider earth through the writing as well, just the spending time, the paying attention, these things are invaluable.
And what advice would you give to writers who want to explore themes of nature?
Get outside, be curious, maybe take a magnifying glass or a pair of binoculars, but just really look and see. And take a notebook, yes, but don't rush to taking notes and so on. Just to feel in a sensory way what it's like to be in the water or in the air, or feeling rock. And to note the feelings that one has in response to these things. Just we're in and of this earth. Let's enjoy it.
Yes, of course. And what would you say, how can we connect with ourselves in this process? Because I'm thinking, we start to feel nature, we start to perhaps write, and how can we connect with ourselves in this process as well?
Well, I think we do that naturally through the process of writing, actually. And by
Tell us more about that.
yes, and by asking questions of in the case of Touchstone, of asking questions of rock or stone, that's a dialogue. It's an implied dialogue between self and other. But in the case of the other, it's a stone. But that where it represents earth, I think things can happen in that dialogue.
And can you give us some examples? So what are some of the insights that perhaps participants came when what did they say?
Well, I was asking you the stories about your own stones that you have there. And it is very common that people have a relationship with stone. And one participant wrote a beautiful poem about her mother, because a pebble that she had, her mother had when she died. So there was a sense of handing on across the generations. So an ancestral dimension there, someone else remembered her grandmother, who had a big glass jar in her home, and the grandmother would routinely send the grandchildren off to go and find beautiful pebbles, and the most beautiful ones were put in the glass jar, and they were called oolooks, because the idea of, oh, look at this one,
I like that.
oolooks. I love that word, and I just think that's delightful. So there are these connections with childhood, with memory, and of place, and I'm afraid I have so many pebbles I don't always remember where they come from. But each beach has its own different stones, as does each part of the earth where we live. And one thing I wanted to recommend is that if your listeners, viewers are in the United Kingdom, they can go onto the I think it's the Geological Society, or the Ordnance Survey, that has a website. You can put in your postcode, and you can find out what rock and stone your very home is built upon. Because obviously, until Victorian, or until the 1920s, perhaps, buildings were made of the local rock and stone. Since then, well, even concrete cement still comes from limestone. There's still a connection with the earth. But I invite people to be more curious about where they live.
In closing, Mark, how can writing serve as a tool for fostering empathy and understanding towards the natural world?
I think it does so just through creating a bit of time apart and a sense of play, and that can connect with the perhaps childish parts of ourselves. And I don't mean that in a derogatory way, because we need to play. And that's where I feel that Touchstone is just a very modest contribution. And it's certainly not something for everybody, but for some people it can touch their hearts. And again, with my workshop participants, people saying, gosh, I haven't done creative writing or writing since I was at school, and it's fun. And this idea of creative writing for therapeutic purposes, it's crucial for me that we leave our self-critic at the door. But to do that, we have to acknowledge the self-critic and give them a role, or to just park them here and give them something to do whilst we're off playing. And then crucially, that sense of not judging the writing, but seeing it as work in progress, or it simply captures that experience, and that can be enough. And that in itself, I think, is a kind of revelation. Just to the experience of having been alive on this afternoon, on this particular day, in these weather conditions, feeling the wind, being in the sea, seeing the river, whatever it might, hearing the birds, whatever it is, all of these things that make us feel alive.
And how does writing, because I thought you've mentioned there's something very important. How does writing can help us to look at that critic, perhaps notice it, just notice it, or be aware of it? How does writing help us?
Well, because there's a third party here, which is the pen and the page. And there's me or you doing the observing, and the writing and the reflecting, and so this triangulation between self and nature, landscape, whatever it is, and the page, and that process of reflection, I think something quite magical can happen there. But equally, let's not have too high an expectation. It can just be, this is what it was like to be here on this day. And that in itself is sufficient.
Yeah, that's very beautiful. Thank you, Mark. I think with your passion, we definitely inspired people to go outside. I for one feel inspired, so I'll go. I'll go outside and spend. I love spending time in nature as it is, but I think I'll pay even more attention to stones and their texture and see how I feel about it. So thank you so much for for inspiring me and inspiring probably our listeners when they will look at this. And have a wonderful day. Keep on doing what you're doing. And inspire more people to go outdoors, to just be in nature more than anything. And then explore their creativity and connect that with writing as well.
You've got it, Alina. It's a pleasure to meet you. Thank you very much for your interest.
Thank you.